My name doesn't matter much on the dock floor. Mostly, I'm the night man, or Old Dunmore. Or, on a good day, hey, you. I've spent 41 years keeping ships breathing on Dry Dock 7, in the Velcaran Dominion's old yards, and I like it that way. Nobody asks an invisible man to explain himself. So when the salvage corvette towed in that broken hulk 3 months back, I wasn't expecting to be part of the story. I was expecting to clean the slip after the brass finished arguing over it, same as always. The ship was called the Tireless. 22 years gone, the record said. Lost testing the Dominion's first long-fold drive, the one meant to fold a year's voyage into an afternoon. It folded something all right, just not what anyone planned. The ship drifted dark at the edge of charted space for 2 decades, until a survey crew stumbled onto it. Hull intact, drive cold, 1 man still aboard. Consort Iden Vale, husband to Empress Leora, father to a girl who'd been 3 years old when he left, and who was, by the time they found him, a grown woman commanding her own cruiser wing. He wasn't dead. He was in the stasis pod, alive, breathing slow as a held note, and nobody could get him out. For 6 weeks, the Dominion's best engineers crawled over that pod. They ran diagnostics I couldn't pronounce. They argued about field harmonics and decay curves, and whether forcing the seal wrong would kill him faster than leaving him in there another 20 years. I know this because I overheard it, the way dock workers overhear everything, sweeping near open hatches, standing where nobody looks twice. One of them, a sharp young engineer named Corvin Thess, caught me lingering near the access ladder one night, and told me, not unkindly, to get back to my own work. "This isn't a scrub job, Dunmore," he said. "This is imperial property, royal property, now, technically." He meant it as a kindness, I think, keeping an old mechanic from getting blamed for anything if it went wrong. I went back to mopping the gantry, but I kept thinking about that ladder, about the pod's outer housing, which I'd glimpsed once when nobody was looking, an old design, older than the fancy digital locks the engineers kept hammering at. Underneath all that modern shielding sat a perfectly ordinary manual release wheel, the kind they used to put on everything 40 years ago, back before computers got proud of themselves. Nobody was touching it. Nobody was even looking at it. They'd stacked 3 generations of clever locks on top of a plain wheel that, far as I could tell, hadn't turned in 22 years. 22 years of vacuum grease gone to tar. That wheel wasn't broken. It was just stuck. I didn't say any of this out loud. Engineers like Thess spend years learning to think in numbers I never had the schooling for, and I've learned not to walk into a room full of degrees and announce that the answer's a rag and some patience. Mostly because nobody believes you, and partly because, until you've proven it, you sound like a fool. So I kept my mouth shut and kept mopping, and I kept looking at that ladder every time I passed it. I waited until the night shift cleared the bay. Gone 2 in the morning, just me and the hum of the cooling vents. I climbed the access ladder with a rag, a tin of penetrating oil from my own kit, and absolutely no authorization to be there. If Thess found me, I'd be sweeping a different bay by sunrise, and lucky to keep that. I worked that wheel the way I'd worked stuck valves and frozen hinges for 41 years. Oil first, a little patience, a lot of small turns instead of one big one. Quarter-inch weight, quarter-inch weight. My hands ached after 20 minutes. After an hour, something gave. Not a crack, just a softening. The wheel finally remembering it used to move. I kept at it past 3, past 4, until the wheel turned a full half circle under my palm, and a long breath of stale, cold air sighed out of the seal. The pod's status lights, dead for 6 weeks, came up soft amber. I didn't touch anything else. I climbed back down, found the night supervisor, and said the words that probably saved my job instead of ending it. "You'd better call somebody. I think I just woke him up." By the time Empress Leora reached the bay, still in her dressing robe, hair undone, the engineers had the pod's cover lifted, and Consort Iden Vale was breathing on his own, blinking against light he hadn't seen in 2 decades. He didn't look 22 years gone. Stasis does that. Keeps the body at a single held breath while the world outside keeps walking. He looked maybe 10 years older than the wedding portraits hung in the corridor outside the records office. His wife looked all 22 of those years and more, gray threaded through hair that had been dark, new lines at her eyes. She knelt by the pod and put both hands on his face, like she was checking it was real, and he said her name the way a man says a word he's practiced in the dark for 2 decades, so he wouldn't forget the shape of it. His daughter came running in, still in her cruiser wing uniform, boots half-laced, and stopped 3 feet from the pod like she'd hit glass. She'd been 3 when he left. She didn't remember him. He looked at her. A grown woman, an officer, a stranger wearing the face of the toddler he'd kissed goodbye at a launch window, and I watched something in his expression break clean in half. Joy and grief landing in the same instant. Because you don't get 22 years back just because a pod opens. Nobody was looking at me. That's fine. I've spent a career not being looked at. I picked up my rag and my oil tin and started back toward the ladder, because my shift had technically ended 40 minutes ago, and there was still a floor on Bay 9 that needed mopping. I didn't get 3 steps before someone said, "Wait!" It was the Empress. She crossed the bay floor in slippers not built for grading, and the whole crowd of engineers, Thess included, went quiet and made room, the way a room does for something it doesn't understand yet. "They tell me a dock mechanic opened that seal," she said. "Not the engineers. Not the diagnostic teams. A mechanic, at 2 in the morning, with a rag and a tin of oil." "Wheel was just stuck, Your Grace," I said. "Same as half the doors on this dock. Somebody builds a clever lock on top of an old one, and forgets the old one's still there." She looked at me a long moment, not the way royalty usually looks at a man in oil-stained coveralls, which is to say, not at all, but really looked. The way you look at someone you're trying to understand. Behind her, Iden Vale was sitting up now, his daughter's hand gripped tight in both of his, like letting go might cost him another 22 years. "I want to give you something," the Empress said. "Quarters in the palace wing. A title. Whatever you'd ask for, I'd grant it tonight, gladly, and mean it." I thought about that for exactly as long as it took to be polite. Then I told her the truth. "Your Grace, I'm 63 years old, and I've had a wrench in my hand since I was 17. I don't know what I'd do with a palace room except track grease through it. I've got a floor that needs mopping in about 30 minutes, and there's a hinge on a hatch over on Bay 4 that's needed grease for a week, and nobody's touched it because everybody's been busy with your husband's pod," which, fair enough. I nodded toward Vale and his daughter, still wrapped around each other like they could weld the lost years shut by holding on hard enough. "I'm glad I could help, I am, but I'd rather go back to my own floor than learn a new one." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer, and respected it more for getting it. "Then at least let the yards know," she said, "that Walt Dunmore doesn't ask permission to fix what's broken. Not anymore, not from anyone. That's the closest thing to a reward I ever took from the whole business. Not a title, not a room, just an old woman's word that nobody on this dock would tell me to get back to my own work again." I finished my shift. I greased the hinge on Bay 4 the next morning, the regular way, with my own hands and somebody else's dirt under my nails, same as every morning before it. The tireless got towed out a month later for a proper refit. Somewhere in the palace, a man who'd lost 22 years was learning his daughter all over again, one slow conversation at a time, the way you learn anything that matters, not all at once, and not for free. I still don't know what they did with that old manual wheel. Probably scrapped it for something modern. Seems a shame to me. It worked fine in the end. It just needed somebody willing to turn it slow.